Despite all of his flaws, Reigen represents a sort of good faith, bad action person that viewers and eventually seemingly the whole internet couldn't help but root for. And finally, we've seen his story come to an end, at least as far as we the viewer get to see it. Reigen was always a con man. He took advantage of people's ungrounded spirituality to give cheap mysticism to issues that never even existed, upsell and prey upon people too dumb to know the wiser. Of course, unknowingly, Reigen himself was actually living in a world filled with spiritual phenomenon that did occasionally cross into the line of his supposed profession. Reigen saw the disheartened young mob from a young age, saw his listlessness, his insecurity, and lack of direction, and took him under his wing, pretending to know the wiser. Reigen then used mob's powers for his own good, having mob properly accredit the business when it came to the real spiritual matters whenever they confronted themselves, while pretending to know what was going on. But while accurate to say that he used mob, saying Reigen used mob is not quite accurate. It fails to see Reigen's full intentions in the light, and instead view him from a purely cynical and negative perspective. Reigen was a failure. He was ashamed and he hated himself, leaving the business world barely scraping by and throwing away the little shame he had to swindle people by. He was unsatisfied, unhappy. When mob came into his life, the gift he gave Reigen wasn't ultimately his powers, although they did remain useful. Instead, it was a sense of self to live up to, of a self that he had forgotten and given up on. What mob ultimately gave Reigen, even though built on a lie, was his place to be seen not as a scurrying rodent, a stain on society, a con man, a betrayer, but a light and a leader, someone to be trusted, something he never thought he would ever be worthy of after the life that he had come into. Mob, in his innocent faith in Reigen, gave Reigen something that he could never deserve nor believe he would ever be given. And just as multiple gullible people had come before, Reigen took advantage of it, however, for entirely different reasons. While Reigen had people come to him with fake or real problems that he would lie and pretend to solve for money, mob came to him with a fake faith in him that he would live the lie of, to keep the hope alive that the person mob believed in was still somewhere inside of him. Over the course of the self-serving but ultimately sympathetic and desperate lie, the faith mob showed in Reigen and Reigen's fear of the reality coming to mob, Reigen's fear of breaking mob's heart, caused Reigen to genuinely take him under his wing and actually live up to the expectation. Trying to give the best advice that he could, protect him from bad choices, listen to mob's problems, and become the friend that mob desperately needed, while also developing his own sense of empathy, even in spite of his own self-preservation. When Reigen repeatedly found himself stepping into danger more and more often with higher and higher frequency, he started to become the person that mob initially saw. Then in Season 2, when his fraud was somewhat exposed, the number one shame and fear he had was for mob to break in his belief of him. For mob, the last person who made him feel like he could actually do good, that he could be a person who deserved to live, to walk out on him. It was unbearable, but followed by one of the most iconic moments in the show. Reigen, gripping his fist, fighting back tears, asks if he's seen the magazines and TV, if he knows who he really is. Mob's reaction is that he's a really good guy. We know with Season 3 that Mob still doesn't understand that Reigen has no powers, and feels mixed as to how much of a fraud that he may be. But as to the validity of the exposés and what Mob has seen or known is kept vague, seemingly to imprint onto the viewer if to say, no matter what anyone else says you are, I know that you're a good person. I know the good person you can be. I know who you are. A genuinely good guy. And this emotionally affects and impacts Reigen in multiple ways, understandably. that Mob trusts the good that Reigen is due to what he has seen personally, that he believes in him enough to not easily be swayed, and that he truly has faith in Reigen. The thing that Reigen was so afraid of losing, but twofold, this met him with uncertainty of the answer. Reigen is forced to know the guilt that despite this level of trust from Mob, that he still has yet to tell Mob the truth. Since it still seems so difficult for him, he seems to default back to his cowardice and have some sort of private resolution to act better and more so for Mob's sake to overcome this shame. Again, as before, putting his life on the line for Mob again at the end of Season 2. In Season 3, we also see him spending time with Mob on New Year's, clearly willing to spend time and make Mob a priority for things having nothing to do with powers or money, but purely out of a genuine relationship, and that's important to see before the final arc. So with this context, the value of the relationship to Reigen, and his attempts to amend his own lack of honesty through good actions that we've come to see at the end of Season 3, Mob loses control of his powers. And despite Teru being destroyed and the city being blown to ruins, powerless Reigen is insistent upon giving his life to ensure if this is the end, if Mob has truly lost it, if this is his last chance, he, at potential cost of his own life, needs to fulfill his final wish. He needs to tell Mob the truth. We have spent the entire time that we've known Reigen living in his lie, to the person perhaps who has come to mean the most to him. We have seen this lie eat at him. We have seen his wish for this hope of him to not be a lie, but to transform him, to become a truth. We have seen him act shameful, desperate, but still noble and brave. So regardless of the outcome, he's the one to bring Mob back out of it. After risking everything and trying all he can think to do, he gets his moment to speak. That the day they met, Reigen lied to Mob. That he believed him so easily. That more so, while he pretended to understand what Mob was going through, while he tried to help, he never knew anything. That because he never knew anything, and that despite that, Mob has still grown so much as a person, that he, Reigen, knows better than anyone that Mob can always overcome this. That he will always make the right choice. That he can change into the person he wants to be, not because of powers or because of an abstract, stupid idea of being special, but because Mob is Mob. The boy who has carried this over his back for so long and harbored kindness, faith, and love for everyone around him, who has yearned to help even the cruelest looking across everyone. Reigen's last wish is to, through establishing how little he knows, build credit to how much he knows Mob has managed by himself. Reigen's final wish is that Mob will finally love himself. Through the highs and lows, the mistakes, the failures, that he will recognize as a person his continued ability to keep blossoming through those things, all on his own strength. That he will realize that his life is his own.
何の力もないんだ。持ってないんだよ。最初から嘘だったんだ。よく嘘をつく。逆にも初めてお前が事務所に来た日、俺は嘘をついた。本当は何も知らねえんだ。だけど最後にもう少し言わせて、お前だけが特別なわけじゃない。要するにだ、お前はそのままでいい。受け入れてやれ。自分を。お前なら、モブならそれができるってことを俺は知ってる。
Come see me react to anime on stream. I play Minecraft, Hades, Sekiro, and countless other FromSoft games and non-FromSoft games. Please support my continued financial desperation on Patreon or through PayPal, and finally, thanks to everyone's continued support, like Daniel Frausing, Zioma, Burrito Ronin, Benny, Icarus, Young Suk Chung, and everyone else. I appreciate it immensely. I hope you enjoyed Mob's finale, and more to come soon.